Sam Altman and OpenAI strike back against DeepSeek with the very powerful new research tool, Deep Research, that is powered by the O3 model. And it's not just that, it's O3 Mini and a brand new font. How deep does this go? Can Deep Research out deep DeepSeek?
It goes very deep.
And that is Tim Simmons from the amazing AI YouTube channel, Theoretically Media. He is joining us this week because Kevin is on vacation with his family and it is his dad's 70th birthday.
Ooh, I want to go on vacation.
This is not the time, Tim.
And we'll be talking about Replic's new agentic AI app, plus a crazy new lip sync deepfake tool from ByteDance that is called Omnihuman.
And we have so much more. NVIDIA's training robots on moves from some of the most famous sports stars in history, from LeBron James to Kobe Bryant and Ronaldo.
And we've got Gandalf in a cage match.
Why not? It's AI for humans, everybody. We are so thrilled to be joined by Tim Simmons from Theoretically Media. This is one of our favorite AI channels on YouTube, and Tim does a lot of amazing stuff with creative AI. So Tim, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Big shoes to fill with Kevin off on vacation, I guess.
That's right. Well, that's what he says, at least. But we have such big news, Tim, and I think we have to hit the biggest news of the week.
Sure.
OpenAI has a new font. Have you seen the new font?
I mean, I have seen the new font, and I mean, stunning, breathtaking, clearly taking the lead in China when it comes to fonts.
Yes, clearly. So this is not the big news. The big news, as we all know, is that Sam Altman has kind of pushed back against the DeepSeek invaders, let's call them, or the crazy Chinese model that kind of took over the internet and crashed the stock market. Sam Altman has basically said, I'm going to start shipping stuff at an insane rate. And really, Tim, the big news that we got this week was Deep Research, which came out on a Sunday night here for me and Monday morning for some people in Japan. But have you had a chance to play with this yet?
I have. Actually, I did a full deep dive into creative use cases with Deep Research over on my channel. I just finished that up today. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Have you gotten a chance to play with it?
I haven't played with it, but I've done a lot of deep research into Deep Research. So let's put it that way. I can keep playing that way. But just to kind of set the table here for everybody. So what Deep Research is a new agentic model that runs on ChatGPT and actually uses the O3 model as its backbone. In fact, it's the first thing officially that uses the O3 model for the public, and you can only access it if you have a $200 OpenAI Pro subscription right now. So that's a pretty expensive way in the door. But I have seen so many people talk about how good it is, and I want to hear more about your experience with it in a bit. But Casey Newton had an amazing write-up in Platformer, and he's somebody who's obviously the host of Hard Fork, which we listen to all the time here, the podcast, but has been relatively, skeptical of AI tools, and he had a good experience. But the most interesting one that kind of shocked me was hearing from Tyler Cohen, who, if you're not familiar with Tyler Cohen out there, Tyler is a well-known economist. He's written some incredible books. He has done a lot of work, at least trying these AI tools, and he specifically said that he had it write a number of 10-page papers for him, each of them outstanding. I think the quality is comparable to having a good PhD level research assistant and sending that person away with a task for a week or two, maybe more, except that Deep Research does the work in 5 minutes. So this is the promise, Tim, of what very advanced AI can do for us. I guess when I say us, I mean, the kind of plebs of the world might not be doing deep research on biological weapons or anything in that way. But this is kind of the promise of next generation AI, right? That you could send it away and it could come back with something that would be super powerful. You did something in your video which I thought was interesting. You kind of tried to find ways to make it useful to you. So maybe kind of tell us a little bit about what your experience with it was and kind of the pros and minuses of it.
So, I mean, I'll say previous to this, I should mention that this is not the first time that we have seen Deep Research. Google Gemini, the Pro 1.5 version, I believe, had Deep Research as well. So, we've had access to this. Now, there is that OpenAI O3 spank on the whole thing, and it definitely does show through. So the way that I decided to approach it, because I'm not a research scientist, nor am I, an astrophysicist or anything. I'm just a guy with a YouTube channel that talks about AI video. But, not to say that. I mean, I still have to do my own research on, what's happening. And I did find that in terms of sort of real-time news, it does not do extremely well. So, which is good for me. It keeps me, it keeps my job alive. But like if I ask it for, what the latest, everything that happened today in the world of generative AI video, it will come back with things like Runway has released Gen 3. And it's like, well, that was a while ago.
That was a little bit ago. Yeah.
Good effort. So what I decided to do was kind of circle around and start thinking about it as like a real research tool. Like if you wanted to craft, say, an AI viral video alongside the very famous Wes Anderson Star Wars trailers, or what was the big one? Like the Shy Kids, right? Airhead. Yeah. What do all of these videos that had over 10 million views? What do they all sort of have in common? So I went through and identified a few of them, and it found things like the commonalities being like it was all like human edited. Everything had kind of a heart to it. There was pacing and story with it. And of course, the big one was like between the Shy Kids and there was one called The Heist by David Zada, I believe.
Jason Zada. Yeah, who I know. Yeah. He's he's amazing.
But he was first to market with the first VO2 video. So, so there is those aspects to it. But I think it's like when you go through that research paper on, how to make an AI viral video, it does have some really great ideas. I also prompted for things like, what's the best way to prompt in a AI video generator, and other questions like, is it better to subscribe to Runway, Minimax, 11 Labs, Midjourney, etc., or to build your own machine? And it went through and did all of the pricing on it, and it basically came back with like the first year you're actually ahead by subscribing to all of these services, but by the time you hit year 5, you're basically at like an $8,000 difference. So
no one talks about year 5 in this space, Tim. Year 5, we're going to be living plugged into the matrix with like little tools coming out of our brains and all sorts of other things. But I mean, I think, listen, that is a really interesting perspective, right? Because I would put us squarely in the non-academic use case, right? Because I think that there's a lot of people out there who have said, and I've seen, and even in the video that they showed from Japan, they talked about this idea of being able to kind of create these kind of very dense academic or marketing driven or financial papers, and all of that, like, it really will depend on the results. And I guess that's why Tyler and Casey are both interesting to me. The other side of this, I think, was interesting in that video, which gets to the point of some of the stuff you were asking about. So in the video, they actually look for and ask for deep research to go off and like research the best skis and come back with the best version of skis. And what I immediately thought about was that is a really good use case of agentic AI, right? Like, there's a lot of people out there who will go and spend all this time figuring out like what's the best computer monitor to buy. And for some people it might be fun and they're not going to want it, but like what you really want is the answer and know that something spent the time on it. But that is also Google's business model, right? Like Google's entire business model is based around the idea of you clicking on links to see what's there. So I think that's going to be an interesting shift overall. And the other thing I think that's really important to think about here, and we're going to play a clip from Sam. Sam Altman was in Japan meeting with Masa, the guy who runs SoftBank. But he particularly talked about the idea of how much work this can do when it compares to the kind of worldwide employment rankings, let's call it. So we'll play that clip here.
This can do complex research tasks for you. Tasks that might take 30 minutes, they might take 30 days. It's powered by O3. It's the first time that the outside world gets to use our O3 model. And it can browse the web, scan text, images, PDFs, much more, synthesize this, reason through it, and prepare a report for you. So it takes a while. It goes off and does all of this work. You can see what it's thinking about as it goes. It's different than ChatGPT, where you instantly get a response. Here, you start off a task, like you might give a task to a sophisticated coworker, and deep research goes off, thinks through it, gathers insights, gets it together, finds sources, and gets you a report. This is a system that I think can do, this is just an estimate of mine, but I think can do a single-digit percentage of all economically valuable tasks in the world.
So Tim, single-digit percentage of all the work in the world. That is not a small amount, right?
It's not, but it sounds like it's small. Does a single digit? Single digit's nothing compared to the
single digits, plural. They're plural.
Yeah,
that's up to 9. That's up to 9
of all the numbers. No, that is it is definitely a. But Sam says bombastic stuff like that all the time. I mean, eventually we do know that we're going to get there. But I mean, he also, occasionally you'll run across a tweet of just like we've harnessed the power of the Star of Orion, and the AI god is amongst us now, releasing sometime this April. Yeah, we will eventually get there. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be deep research that is going to do it. So I think I think the single digits amongst us are safe for a little bit longer.
Keep making stuff. That's the key. Well, I think the interesting thing here is that like, you see stuff kind of chipping away at the things that are promised, right? Like people have talked about for a long time, 2025 is going to be the year of agents, right? We've discussed on this show kind of ad nauseum what an AI agent is, but in case you're listening for the first time, that's the idea that an AI is going to go out and do stuff for you and come back with a result. Deep research is a version of an agent. And to Tim's point, like Google has a version of this same thing. Operator is another version of an agent that they release, which is something that can access the internet, which we talked about last week in the show. And clearly there are companies are seeing value in this, or at least Masa from SoftBank is seeing a lot of value in this, because they have now partnered with OpenAI to create a new company called SB OpenAI Japan. And there's a bunch of news around this. Samwin did a speaking gig with Masa, and like, it's clear that the money pouring in here is now, I think people are trying to see an end game here, right? So one of the things we've talked about in the show a lot is this idea of kind of the endless fount of money coming in. In fact, we didn't even cover this last week because it happened after our show, but OpenAI is now valued at $340 billion, or is going to be valued at that, which is just an astronomical amount of money. Yep. As somebody who works with these tools all the time and obviously spends money on them, right? You and I and our whole crew, like we spend money on them. Do you think
$200 a month right now?
Well, I know that's what we track it, right? Like it's not cheap, right? You're $200 for just for the pro plan, and on top of all the other video tools and stuff. Yeah. But like, do you see a world where this stuff, the promise of the economics of this is going to work out, or do you? Where are you at on the whole kind of like AI hype cycle of all this?
Of the utopian equality, all tools for everyone. Look, I think that it's always going to be a bit tiered. Like it just, I just don't. I mean, as much as I would love to see, I don't know. Like, does it become like EDU licenses at one point when you're in school and you have access to the latest and greatest of the LLM models, and then if you don't go to college, then you have to start paying for it. Like it might be sort of a bit like that, where you have sort of your you have your basic access AI package, and then you have gradual, like, do you want your cable package as well? Do you want your premium subscription package? All of those are going to cost you more. You know what I mean? So that's more than likely, I think, the direction that things will probably head. I don't see a complete I mean, I don't want to get into the whole UBI talk or anything like that, but that becomes an eventuality at some level. But you're still going to need to pay for some kind of like AI service as well.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, well, I don't know. The other thing I think that's really important to think about was that, actually two things. I do want to get into this one thing that really kind of shocked me coming out of the deep research thing, and I don't think has gotten enough attention, which is the fact that deep research scored a 25% on humanities last exam. So if you're
trying to name that humanities last exam,
well, first of all, that's problem number one, right? Like we shouldn't be calling something humanities last. It could be like the humanities, like even last chance or all sorts of other things sound terrible. Like we should come up with something better. But just so humanities last exam is a AI benchmark that was created by Dan Hendricks and a bunch of people to basically really stress test these AIs, to really make sure that we create something that would last for a couple years. We talk about Terence Tao, one of the most famous mathematicians in the world, is involved with it. They created this thing, and I wanted to point this out because Kevin Roos, the New York Times writer, said he basically said, when I wrote about humanities last exam, the leading AI model got an 8.3 percent. 5 models now surpass that. The best model getting a 26.6, which is deep research. That was 10 days ago. So 10 days ago, the best model got an 8.3. And now we're here with deep research at 26.6. And what's crazy here to me, Tim, is just it talks about like the pure speed at which we're moving. And when I try to explain this to people, you know, mostly my family or people that are around me, they're just like, okay, whatever, you know, sure, AI is what it is and ChatGPT is fine. But like, I think between deep research and the other stuff that's kind of bubbling up for the rest of this year, there's a little bit of like, how do you talk to people to understand that like, and it's not like trying to overhype it, but just to understand that there is going to be a change in what these things can do and how much they can do.
So during the holidays, I went to my wife's company dinner party, and we were kind of seated at a table, and there was another person that is kind of relatively as plugged in as I am. So they were talking to us, and we were sort of, you know, typical holiday party talk. You know, it's just like everything's going to change. You don't have no idea what's coming. It's all coming right now. And I mean, like, look, I think that when you get outside of you and I talking, outside of everyone listening right now, if you weren't in this and you just heard us talking in like a grocery store, you would be like, those people are crazy. Those are crazy.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think.
Yeah. But I mean, it doesn't help when, you know, we're like humanity's last exam. It just scored. It just scored
it's not great. We should call it like humanity's doing great exam. Like it's like don't worry, we're 75% ahead of what they can do right now.
I just picture all of these researchers dressed like cowboys in Rio Grande, like just with their guns, just waiting for like
against the robots. The robots are coming in. You know? I should say Dan himself did reply in saying, not sure our last exam will survive optimization. So I think that even himself, the man who created it, is definitely feeling it. And before we move away from this, I do think it's important to kind of play a quote from Masa and Sam's press conference, which really did not only kind of shock me, but really made me laugh. So let's take a listen to that.
I would bet you in the next several years, 10 years, it will gradually start to have, at least understand the people's emotion, and then gradually it will start to have emotion by itself. And it's a good thing to protect human. People think, or if it has the emotion, it's a disaster, it's the demonic, it's a, you know, the bad thing that's the end of human, because they're gonna fight and kill you, destroy you. But I would say, if their source of energy was protein, then it's dangerous. Their source of energy is not protein, so they don't have to eat us. Okay? There's no reason for them to have reward by eating us.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
So Tim, no one is going to eat us, which is good to hear. Like no one's going to be eating us.
I would like to point out as well. There's nothing greater than hearing a Japanese man talk about a large giant robot that is coming to destroy us all.
You're right. That is like we are seeing like a very fun science fiction movie play in front of our eyes.
So if Mechagodzilla ate people, then things equal bad.
That's OpenAI. So now we have a perfect thing. There we go. We know what it is going forward.
If that's the case, do you think, as Microsoft is the 800-pound gorilla, do you think that mechanizes at some point, and then instead of just having a giant, you know, AI company battle, we can have a mecha, you know, kaiju
and we
battle?
have a giant mecha llama because we have a llama involved. I don't know what. And then you probably have just a very bookish guy looked like Claude that suddenly just gets super jacked. He becomes like the Hulk. He becomes like the Hulk. So anyway, this is OpenAI's big thing. Obviously, it's a huge week for them. I'm really curious to know like what's going to come down the pipe again, because like, I mean, they've clearly been loading up fastball after fastball. The big question I have for you Tim, is, you know, there's all this has happened in January. Now it's February, but just barely February.
Is it? What?
Yeah, I know, right? It's crazy. And there have been like hints, and Sam has hinted in different things. He did a Reddit AMA that people should read, that like, you know, the GPT-5 model is coming, but like clearly there are other models still coming this year, and not only OpenAI. We're talking about, the new Grok model. Clearly, Gemini is going to be coming out with something very soon. Claude, I would assume, Anthropic is going to be coming out as well. What do you expect for the next 6 months? Are you expecting this sort of pace to continue, or do you feel like we're going to get a little bit of breather and we'll kind of have some ups and downs throughout this year?
I feel like it's probably going to be a little bit like what I'm experiencing on the video side as well, which is just like it's just like this 1-2 punch of somebody releases something and then a week later somebody else releases something, but it's all about the same. Everything stays at kind of the same level. So I think that we're probably going to be hitting a point of wonder exhaustion.
Interesting.
At some point, where it's just sort of now ChatGPT, ChatGPT now can read the emotions on my face and it can make my monitor cry with me. Literally,
how come it can't make my kids cry? That's the next question. Yeah, it's I can make me cry, but it can't make my kids cry. What is it? You're absolutely right. By the way, this is what happens. This is what happens with people, right? It happens every time new technology comes out. We just get used to it, and then we decide what's next.
So I was just in San Francisco, the land of the Waymo, if you will, and and I do not live in the Bay Area or in a Waymo city. So it was, at some point I had to look around and go those are robot cars. There are robot cars just driving around everywhere. There are cars without people driven by robots, ghost robots at that, that are just, and everyone's just there's a Waymo. And I keep thinking if you were to go back to, if you could take my grandfather in his 20s and teleport him to that moment where you're just there's a bunch of robot cars just driving around. By the way, I have, all of the world's information in my pocket right now. It's just what? And that's not that long ago. So the amount of future shock that we have experienced and we have adapted to so quickly of just ghost robot driving a car around. guess I'll get in it.
And you're going to trust it because it's now normal. Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, everybody, that is Deep Research. But before we move on to the next thing, I want to remind everybody to subscribe to this show and specifically go check out Tim's show. So Tim's YouTube handle is it at Theoretically Media? Is that what your YouTube handle is?
I think you do youtube.com/@Theoretically Media, or just search Theoretically Media. Or if you can't spell that, just type in AI video and my stupid mug will probably show up at some point.
That's right. So Tim does a lot of great demos of brand new AI stuff that comes out. We're going to talk about one a little bit later in the show, but definitely go check him out. And if you're checking us out, please like and subscribe as per usual. But also, if you're listening to us, we always love it when you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That does really well for us. We've been doing a few other podcasts. Last week, I was on a Barron Streetwise podcast where I talked about DeepSeek, but also talked about AI video stuff, which I thought was pretty interesting. So go check that out. And go check out Tim's channel as well. Next up, we're going to briefly talk, Tim, about O3, because O3 Mini is the thing that kind of got shoved to the side by Deep Research. And I just want to kind of make sure everybody knows O3 Mini dropped late last week after our show came out. And this is a free reasoning model. And this is clearly OpenAI's direct response right now to the DeepSeek R1 stuff. Obviously, as we covered last week, DeepSeek R1 is very high up in the App Store. A lot of people are using it. They wanted to show that they had a powerful reasoning model, more powerful reasoning model that would be accessible to everybody. And I think the thing that's surprising here a little bit is that they dropped it for free, but also that they dropped it this quickly, because I really didn't think that this was going to come out as fast. Now, obviously, Deep Research was a surprise, but this is another big deal from them.
I don't know. Have you got a chance to play with O3 Mini as well?
Yes, I played with it a little bit. Yeah, the
reasoning stuff is fun and fascinating to click along and just read along with. Where's your brain going there, O3? We had that with O1 as well, but O3 is it's faster for one.
Yeah,
and then I presume the level of questioning that I'm giving it is, it's not even breaking a sweat with the questions that I'm asking. How long do I air fry potatoes for?
Yeah, I know that's a classic. It's like the GPT-4o question. It'll be it would kick you down to the little brother. Exactly. One thing they talk about with this is it's much better on coding and much better on science questions. And I do think this is something, at least tangentially, that I have seen people do. And there's been a lot of people out there who are using using O3 Mini to one-shot, really interesting kind of physics puzzles. I don't know if you've seen these videos that are floating around. There's some really interesting stuff that's being done with it. And in my mind, this kind of transitions us to the next story, which is that Replit just released a brand new app, an iPhone app. And what's so cool, and Replit, if you're not familiar, Replit is a company that basically allows you to code in the cloud and do all these AI models. They have an AI agentic coding tool, kind of like Cursor, all these other things out there. But what they did is they released an app. And today I downloaded it and played with it. And it is... What I think is so interesting about this is it powered by the back end of these high-end models, and which are very good at coding,
right?
But they don't expose you to the coding, because what it basically does is it allows you to type in something that you want. And I went in there and asked it, hey, make me a marble race game, make me a marble race game and see how it can do. And you just kind of watch it install all the libraries. And if you're not a coder, you don't know a lot about this, you might not understand, but like when you load up a program, it needs a bunch of different Python libraries or different things from certain places. And then it actually returns a result. You really don't see the code at all. And to me, what's interesting about this kind of transition point in this world that we're living in, and we've talked on the show a lot about the idea of that you can be a little bit more of an idea guy now, and you don't have to be a hardcore coder to kind of do these things. But now we're transitioning to the idea where like anybody can make software, right? And when anybody can make software, it is a completely different sort of world, because it just changes it. And I thought when I was doing this, and I'd be curious to know about this for you, I thought about what it would have been like to have this tool when I was a kid, right? Or to give this tool to kids now, because the idea that you can just imagine anything for a computer to do, and that through the kind of like magic of AI prompting and coding, it will return you something that you can then tinker with and make into something even better. That feels like such a transformative moment in terms of how we use software, and not only how we use it, but like how we make it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, we've seen a couple of examples already of people just, drawing a picture of the website that they want to see, uploading it to an LLM and having it then code that website. I mean, that's pretty. So essentially, yes, we are very much reaching a point of, if you can dream it or explain it, you can build it. The one thing that, not to go AI doomer or anything like that, but I mean, like, there has been some interesting stuff that we've seen recently with like two LLMs talking to one another. I don't know if you've seen this, where they've switched over to like Chinese just because it's easier. It's a trick that I do with video prompting every once in a while too, because a lot of times you'll have that 1,000 or 2,000 character limit, but if you translate it to Chinese, you get more characters, because
interesting,
more efficient language. I do sort of wonder that when we hit a point with something like the Replit, coding app or anything like that, where if it starts to become more efficient in its coding language, and there was an example that we saw just kind of recently as well, where we were looking at two AI agents talking to one another, and it was starting to turn into what we perceive as gibberish, but what they perceive as.
But they were connecting with each other in some way.
Yeah,
it's like their secret language on a date. They're on a date and they don't want anybody else at the other table to hear what they're saying.
I mean, there is a level of like, when you buy like a BMW these days, and you can't even get into the engine. Even if you could get into the engine, you wouldn't know what to do with it, because that is probably going to happen at some point. I guess there's a part of me that's a little bit worried that what happens when we don't have the mechanic anymore, and at that point, like, we're sort of, how do we fix things? How do we fix
things? I think this is a very rational and reasonable argument. And not only how do we fix things, but what if the BMW starts driving us in a place we don't want to go to, and we can't tell it not to? That's where it gets a little scary. I mean, so there's two different sizes. Yes, I completely understand that aspect of it. I think for me, when I saw this, it was just me thinking, if you could hand a tool like this to a 8-year-old, and the 8-year-old was like somebody who's like, hey, I play Minecraft all the time and I see people do Minecraft mods, but I don't really understand how to, code this thing. To your point, I'm not saying they shouldn't learn how to code that thing, but like just the fact that they could like get the first few steps on the way and then dig further down, because in the Replit thing, you're able to kind of unpack the code. Like the code is there and you can look at it. But you're right. It's funny to think about this way, because it really does show you there's kind of two sides to this. One is you make these tools accessible and interesting for everybody. But on the other side, it's a little bit of an easier way into this. And I think a lot of coders would be like, well, I spent my whole life, learning these basic rule sets. I just hope that like I do think that, to your BMW metaphor, there will be the BMW mechanics and they'll be paid very well because they know how to access these tools, but there will be a lot more drivers, right? And there'll be a lot more people who can drive those interesting cars because, or a very personalized car. Like, I mean, that's one of the things that Replic's kind of talking about here is the idea of like, hey, you could make your own piece of software for X. Like, you know, if you're making, you know, a video and you wanted a specific filter for something, I've seen people use Blender with O3 and make all sorts of interesting stuff. Like that feels like a really cool way to look at this going forward.
And that is something that I think that I hope doesn't get lost over this whole idea is that, you know, going into like, I'm still a Blender dummy. I'm consistently on the 101 tutorial, you know, on YouTube but you know, there are times when I've been experimenting lately with, with screen capture and having something like ChatGPT teach me, right? At some point with something like Operator, I'll just be able to say, you know, hey, comp me these 3 video pieces together and then, you know, have Thor come in and turn into a frog or whatever I want, you know, whatever. And it'll just take care of all of those things. But at the same time, I'm not learning the skills of how to do that. So, you know, I've worked in Hollywood for a long time, and I've worked, you know, I've produced stuff where I've told artists what to do. So there's that part of it too. You know what I mean? Like and then I've checked on it afterwards as a producer or whatever. So I hope that we spend the time that we save via all of these models learning more about what we're actually passionate about.
No, we're not. We're going to watch Love Island 15. That's what's going to happen to us all. We're going to watch. But honestly, like, we've gone on this a long time, but like, the experimental thing is the thing that I think that's important, right? Yes. Like, and letting people experiment and see how this works, and bespoke software is very cool. Speaking of experiments, there's a really interesting thing that came out of ByteDance that I really want to talk about because this is not something that is out yet, but it is another one of the famous like papers that have been released, but we have not seen code yet. But this is called OmniHuman-1, OmniHuman-1, and it is a really fascinating lip sync and kind of like body sync tool that you spent some time looking into. Tell us about what this is.
You can kind of think of it as like maybe like the good tentpole to it is HeyGen. So, you know, sort of a AI avatar, body avatar. So if you ever notice with the HeyGen stuff, it always kind of has like this weird kind of like the motions are, it's a little, It always kind of gets bouncy. A little bouncy. So this aims to solve that by being able to be driven by input video, input audio, and so on the video, it's looking at 2 things: body language, essentially, and hand language. Podcast listeners can't hear this, but you know, I think that they've all experienced that whole thing where when someone's talking, it's like that hand is cycling completely out of sync with, you know, with what people are saying. So this aims to sort of solve that by analyzing driving video.
Yeah, I mean, there were some interesting ones I saw. The Albert Einstein one was really interesting, right? Because so the Albert Einstein one is your more traditional kind of look at what it would take to take a picture and an audio and make an animated person, right? And we can show that here. If you don't see this here, please check out our show notes. The other one that was really interesting to me was the Taylor Swift one, right? Which again, I love these Chinese models. They just kind of decide we're going to use the biggest stars we possibly can. They had Taylor Swift singing a Chinese song. I'm not sure what the song was, but it was singing a Chinese song and singing in Chinese. What's interesting about it is each step kind of gets better and better. And you're right in that, like the kind of the whole experience of this one starts to feel much more succinct, right? It feels like it's kind of a part. And I guess the question will be is whenever I think of a ByteDance thing, like, again, these Chinese models, especially video models, are getting so good. I know you spend a lot of time with Kling and Minimax. It is interesting to see, like, I feel like at some point get an American like ultimate video model, and we will get a Chinese ultimate video model where like all these things live in, and that'll be the one that kind of like takes off.
I would agree with that. You know, the one AI video model to rule them all, which I'm actually not looking forward to. I think that once that does happen, things start to look a little on the homogenized side.
Oh, that's interesting. I can see that.
You know, it's kind of like how that whole like every Marvel movie started to look the same after a little while.
Yeah,
Like you know, every red cape was the same color red, that sort of thing. So I'm really not looking forward to when that happens. Again, great artists will always find ways around that, to break that, to get around the look. But yeah.
What was your favorite video model right now? Like, you're somebody who spends a lot of time playing with video models, and if you haven't watched Tim's videos, you should. He has a lot of the similar same sort of tests he does with each one. Wasn't there a guy like in a blue suit that you used for each of your tests?
Yeah,
man in a blue suit.
Yeah.
Where do you sit right now on what the best model is as an overall pick? Is there one that you like the best?
You know, so I mean, they're all my children.
Not fair. Can't do that.
I do. Look, I like all of them. I really do. I think that there's something kind of cool and unique about every single one of them. The ones that I'm currently kind of playing around with the most would probably be Hailu Minimax and Kling. Kling, I think, has they have like this like sort of ingredients thing where you can put input you can put like two people, a location, and a prop, and mash them all together, and it does that thing better than any of the other video models currently. And then the other one that I'm like still trying to wrestle like a wild beast is Sora, because Sora is, I mean, it's janky, it's weird, it's unpredictable, but every once in a while, man, when that thing hits, it hits, and I'm dead convinced that there was something to mine out of that. So
I honestly think Sora, I mean, especially when you have the Pro model and you can really kind of rip out a bunch of different exports, Sora always surprises me with the weirdness of it. And we've talked about in the show how much I love weird results sometimes on AI video. I made a video a while back with Veo, and Veo is amazing, but like you don't get as many weird results, and it's semi-disappointing, but also when you're trying to do work, I can understand that. Okay, we should get through a couple other pretty big, interesting video things. We'll do them fast. Matt Anyone was a very small, interesting AI tool that was announced. Again, this is not code is out there, but this is a straightforward, really good AI way to matte out the background of a video. You also covered this. What's your take on this?
I love it. I think it looks really, really good. If you go through and watch the examples, there was two that really kind of blew me away. The Heath Ledger Joker kind of walking, and when it's not necessarily in the chroma green, but when you see the alpha matte and you just see all the wisps of hair, that is that's better than the standard After Effects plugin. It's getting into like nuke territory at this point. So high.
I mean, this is the thing that James Cameron came out 3 or 4 months ago and said how much he was all in on AI. Like, this is the thing that feels like that will make a difference, because Matt Anyone is the kind of tool that you could see easily being integrated into the Adobe Suite or into Final Cut and being super useful. This is an AI tool, and it is incredibly good at what it does.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It also is the name of a new YouTuber, definitely in the AI space, along with Matt Wolf.
There's another Matt?
Yeah. Well, there's Wolf, there's Berman, and there's Matty AI, young Matty AI. So now Matt Anyone.
Oh, yeah. So now we have Matt Anyone. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. That should be the fourth Matt. That's amazing. And then finally, there's another video that came out from Meta, weirdly, called Video Jam. And actually, speaking of Sora's physics, this was really interesting. They're attempting to try to fix the physics in AI video by doing some pretty technical stuff. Have you dug into this yet?
I took a look. I took a glance through the paper, kind of got the gist of it, but I haven't actually dug into how they're doing it, and B, sometimes with the papers, you're like, all right, all right, I see, all right, yeah, all right, did you really? Meta's always been pretty good about it, but basically, it would look like it was taking, because what was it, like breakdancing footage, where if you normally try to prompt for that, you would end up with like a twisty Play-Doh man, like kind of like sponging all over the place, but this was actually figuring out how to get that correct movement via, it kind of looked like it was using some 3D modeling going on in there, or at least some wireframe.
It's a very technical back end, but what it talks about is that the video models right now are kind of ignoring motion, and they prioritize what they see. So that what they're trying to do here is kind of layer on something so that it will pay attention to the motion and the physics of the scene. Sure. It's funny though, as you were saying this, and the videos are all really interesting. You should check it out. Like, especially if you spend time trying to get AI video to do gymnastics or anything like that, this could be a big deal.
Yeah.
But you talk about the idea of like, Tencent or ByteDance often like, being vaporware, something we haven't seen. We haven't seen a meta model in the world, a meta video model in the world either. Now I know they exist. It's kind of like when VO1 came out with Google, they didn't release it to the public. But Meta is probably due for legitimate high res video model because they've been doing the work there for quite a while.
From last I heard, Movie Gen was actually getting rolled into Instagram. And yeah, so it was going to be less a video generator and more like Snapchat filters 2.0. So yeah.
I'm not as excited by that.
Yeah.
Then. You had me at ooh, and then I was down.
So it was kind of more meant to be like replace my T-shirt with a cool, like mom's best friend shirt, and then put me in the Arctic, and now we have a funny meme video. So I don't know. I mean, certainly from the paper, they could flex and just release something that is like that completely blows Sora. VU2 video. I think it could blow them all out of the water, hypothetically. I don't know. We'll see. So, but I just doubt that they will. So, because what's in it for them?
Well, that's so funny. I was going to say that. Like, it's so interesting. These video models, like, it's in some ways it's more hassle than it's worth a little bit for them. Yeah. I mean, because it costs a fortune to render video models, right? There's a lot more data they're going through, but also because of all the rights stuff. They're a giant company, and like the win for them may not be in that space. But anyway, it's a pretty crazy week for this sort of stuff, and I think every week we see new things come out.
Every week is a pretty crazy week.
Every week. But what's even crazier this week is we have some new robots that we got to get into. It's time for Robot Watch. Tim, there's another Tim who wrote a tweet this week that I found very prophetic and I always enjoy. So Tim Urban from Wait But Why, if you're not familiar, it's one of the classic kind of blogs of the internet. Very, very smart writer. Wrote a great book as well. But so Tim's tweet said, humanoid robots and drones will be absolutely everywhere 10 to 20 years from now. Delivery drones flying overhead, robot janitors, baristas, grocery store employees guiding you to the right aisle, and eventually housekeepers, and will all seem as normal as smartphones do today. And I think I agree with this pretty clearly. I don't know what your thoughts. You feel like you're in the same boat?
We were talking about the ghost robots drivers, the Waymo ghost robots or ghost robot cars that were driving around San Francisco, and no one bats an eye. So yeah, that's it's funny because actually I was talking to my Uber driver on the way back to SFO about the Waymos. I'm like, how do you guys feel about that? He's like, well, what are you going to do? I was like, yeah. He's like, they can't drive to the airport at least. I was like, oh, because
not yet at least.
Yeah. But apparently, because I guess they won't take direction from traffic.
I never thought about that. That's interesting.
So
that's why they can't do it.
That's why they can't do it. And I just can't help but think that you can't put those things into like Philadelphia, for example. Like in Philadelphia, did you remember they destroyed the robot? Philadelphia killed the robot that was.
Oh no, I didn't. Did they?
Yeah. Somebody did. I can't remember. It was a research project. They started a robot. They built it to literally walk across the country. It got to Philadelphia, and Philadelphia literally just beat the robot up and killed it. So I do think, I do think that we will see robot delivery drones flying everywhere, and humanoid robot workers, I guess, kind of like going about their daily business, doing their things. I don't put it past human on robot violence.
Well, this is what I want to get into is because the robots that NVIDIA and Carnegie Mellon introduced this week are sports star robots. So I think they might be able to kind of dodge out of the way really fast.
That is true,
So this story is pretty interesting. They actually, so NVIDIA's been talking forever about a simulated training, right? And what simulated training is like training robots in a virtual environment so they know what's real to go when they've been able to do it in the real world. And what they did here, this is the craziest phrase I've ever heard. Dr. Jim Fan, who we've talked about on the show before, works at NVIDIA. He said he's announcing ASAP, a real to sim to real model. Yes. And what that means is that this
like an MC Hammer song, doesn't it?
That's right. Real to real to real. This is basically taking real world motion. And in this case, they took the motion of LeBron James, Cristiano Ronaldo, the soccer star or football player, whatever you like, and Kobe Bryant. And they used that in a simulated universe. The robots practice it. And then they brought those behaviors back into the robots. And the video you're looking at here, or if you're in the show notes, if you're listening, go to the show notes, is these robots basically acting as if they are those stars. And this feels like a really interesting way to think about how, you talk about in Philadelphia or New York City, robots, could get the crap beat out of them.
Or
well,
the other direction.
You put Chuck Liddell's, you get Chuck Liddell training, and it's a whole new game, Tim. It's a whole new game. I mean, so the other interesting thing about robots this week was that you may or may not be familiar with the Twitch streamer Kai Cenat. I mean, you probably are at this point. He's basically a mainstream celebrity. He had one of these robots with him kind of in his life. And it was a really interesting thing to think about we see these videos, these research videos of robots all the time. And what was interesting is to watch Kai, interact with this robot. Now, I don't know for a fact if this was something that was a sales deal or if I'm sure he was sent this robot because of what it is. But what was interesting is like how normalizing it is to see this in the beginning. To your Waymo point, like at first, like everybody's kind of weirded out by it. Then he's kind of bringing it around and it's still kind of surprising to see people interact with it. But like, to me, this is like the kind of first step as to how humanoid robots start to become part of our world, right? Like it's the same way with the Waymo. You might hear about it at first, and it's only in San Francisco, and I live in LA. And so when they first came to LA, when I first saw one, I was like, oh my God, it's really nobody's in that car. Yeah. And then I got in one, and it was like, oh my God, I'm driving, and there's nobody in this car.
Yeah.
And then 3 rides later, it was totally fine, right?
Fine.
So, and that's where like I think San Francisco probably will be the first place, but there will be, to Tim Urban's point, 5, 10, 15 years from now, we're going to be on a street and like, a fifth of the things walking on that street could very well be humanoid robots. And that is like kind of the world that we're entering here.
Well, the funniest part about that too is that so eventually there will be a robot in your house, doing your dishes, doing your laundry, your robot maid who was she on the Jetsons?
Rosie.
Yeah.
We're
Rosie,
really going deep in the Gen X world.
Yeah,
here.
we really are. Yeah. Those are my people. So yeah, we will have, that it'll be amazing and cool. And then like within 2 months, we'll be like, it ran out of batteries and didn't do the laundry again. Like,
I know. And then it'll get mad at you and you'll get mad at it. And then you'll have to live in separate houses. And suddenly you're starting a divorce agreement with your robot. It's like a whole different world. Like honestly, that's something to think about. We're going to have to figure out do robots, are they members of your family?
That's what I was just about to say. Like, if so, like, then, obviously like Rosie 2.0 is going to come out and your Rosie 1.0 sucks. So like, you're just like, well, see a family member. We're upgrading.
I know. And this is, by the way, there was a great show called Humans. Did you ever see that show?
Humans? I remember that show. Yeah.
It's a really interesting show of like the upstairs, downstairs life of what it'll look like in the future if robots like become as prolific as they are. And like, that is a real thing to think about, right? Because like eventually if these AIs keep getting smarter and smarter, and some people argue they're never going to have like some sort of a consciousness, but like eventually you're going to have to think about how you treat them. And in fact, one of the other things I'll say about the Kai Cenat stuff is there was a video where they were kind of sitting around and kind of pushing it around. And we often say, please don't push the robots. No matter what. Yeah. Don't push the robots.
That Boston Dynamic robot will eat your face.
These robots are trained on watching and listening and reading everything. Just make sure the robots make you know you like them. That's the most important thing, I think, of all this. All right, everybody, it's time for us to go around the internet and see some of the fun things people have done with AI. It's time for AI See What You Did There.
Sometimes you're scrolling without a care. Then suddenly you stop and shout. AI, see what you did there. AI, see what you did there.
So, Tim, this is one of our favorite things where we just shout out a bunch of cool things people made online. And I know you've seen a bunch of stuff and cool things out there. I do want to shout out something. This really made me laugh. So basically, this is another dumb version of somebody just taking a funny idea and making it. This is called Lord of the Rings, Kings of the Cage. And they turned the stars of the Lord of the Rings series into UFC fighters. And then there's a little bit of drama at the end of it. I mean, you know how these tools work. I'm sure you see stuff like this all the time, but whenever you see like a very funny idea executed well, it's just a fun thing to watch.
Yeah, I mean, so good, so good. I think I'm not entirely sure, but I think they did they must have done some face swapping on afterwards. I don't think that's coming straight necessarily out of a video generator, but yeah, I mean, it looks fantastic work here. Characters all look incredible. So yeah, I think that there's definitely some image to video, some face swapping, and the fun of it. Looks like it's Minimax.
Well, here's a question for you, because I've done some face swapping, but not a ton. But I think a lot of these celebrity videos, the Door Brothers or many of these, are not just taking straight out from Minimax results. Mm-hmm. What is the best face swap tool to use now? Are you up to date on them? I know that the open source ones could be pretty good.
Yeah, people. The one that I tend to like a lot is Face Fusion, which you can find. You can run that locally via a app called Pinocchio.
We talk about Pinocchio all the time.
So Face Fusion, pretty easy to use. I did a whole tutorial on it. I think the thumbnail for it, if you ever see it, is Uma Thurman in Kill Bill, and then I face swapped it with Scarlett Johansson because that's just funny to me.
That's awesome. Okay, next up in this list, people have been doing all sorts of interesting stuff with O3 Mini, especially what I talked about with it's very good at coding. This guy had this really interesting tweet where he basically came out and said, oh my God, O3 Mini has finally allowed me to do the thing I've always wanted to do, which is an ASCII art generator, which, basically ASCII art, if you're talking about our age in some ways here and growing up on stuff, like ASCII art was like the early internet's like kind of Picassos of the world. Like you could generate almost anything, but you had to use the characters on your keyboard to do it. And what this guy did is he basically coded an AI ASCII art thing. So you can upload a photo to it and it will give you an ASCII art back. And again, this is more interesting to me. I mean, the actual thing is cool. Great. You get ASCII art. But what's interesting here is that this guy, not a coder, used O3 Mini to do this thing for himself. And that is such a cool thing.
Mm-hmm. I love that as he's playing around with the sliders in this too. It just sort of has like this weird hypnotic hallucinogenic kind of like look to it. It's ASCII art is ASCII art. It's just there's something kind of unique and incredible about it.
And then finally, we have one of my favorite creators of all time, and if you're familiar with him, but NeuralViz, who is a great single human being, continues to expand his universe, and he has created the Gloron dating show. And this is a dating show set in his Humans universe. And I always shout him out when he comes up with a new format. Let's take a listen to a little bit of this.
I love him so much because my standards are so low that I can only really dream of having such a barely suitable partner. What are you thinking about?
Dot.
Are you thinking about bugs again, if they sleep?
That's all I think about.
Dorgan, they do. We know that they do. You're pondering again. Stop it. I'm worried that Dorgan is uncomfortable because of the drama that happened in the house last week.
This guy, just one of our favorites. He continues to push different boundaries in different ways. I'm actually doing a talk at NatB this week, and one of the things I'm going to talk about is NatB, for those of you out there who are not familiar, is a television producer something conference. And I've only gone once, but I was invited to come to it, which is going to be interesting. And the talk I'm going to give is going to be about how small studios can now like create and generate their IP in a way that never could have happened before. And I kind of think NeuralViz is like the perfect version of this. Like you can be a person that is 1 to 5 people, a studio that's 1 to 5 people, and you can spin up things and try things, and you don't need a lot of money to try it. And it just feels like, to me, that's the future of a lot of video, period, not just AI video.
One of the things that we don't hear anymore is it's just not ready yet. That was something that we heard a lot of in early AI video. Yeah, well, it's cute, but it's not there yet. That I haven't heard that in kind of a while, because it is there. You have to work at it, and you have to finagle it, and you have to wrestle with it, but it can be done now. And I think that I honestly believe that within this year, by the time we hit calendar year 2026, we will have seen one major breakout AI type series. The thing that I keep thinking of is the South Park short, the original.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I think that we'll see something hit that viral level of that can be turned into a property. sometime this year. I don't think it'll come out of a studio. I think it'll come out of an independent production. Maybe just 3 dudes in a garage. You never know. So,
well, that honestly is the whole thesis of my talk, is that the 3 dudes or 3 ladies or 3 mixes of dudes or ladies, whatever gender you like to prefer, is the future of kind of all of this stuff,
Yes.
right? Because I think that like there will always be this kind of like super high end Hollywood version, which I
Right.
think like once you get the IP to where it's like everybody knows it and they're all aware of it and they can all access it, like it's Game of Thrones or it's Marvel, you need maybe a huge studio to do that. But like I think the most interesting stuff is going to kind of bubble up. And the example I use, and this is maybe going a little deep on this, but are you familiar with Skibbity Toilet? You know what Skibbity Toilet?
I have kids. I have kids. I'm aware. I have 2 kids in Generation Skibbity.
So okay, so my kids are older; they're girls, but I wasn't there. But I am the same. I have my 12-year-old boy in my brain. So like when it first came out, I was pretty impressed by it. And then the kind of the speed that it took off is just a really interesting thing. And so the overall thesis here is that like these kinds of things, like whether it's neural viz or it's a 3 guys in a garage making something, the distribution part of it's very easy now, right? Yeah. So if the distribution part's easy and then suddenly the production part gets much easier, there's just this opportunity that was never there in the last 50 years in the entertainment business where the gatekeepers don't really exist in any sort of way.
I've given a talk a couple of times in like Hollywood circles, and I come back a lot on that whole like it's gonna ruin all the jobs are gonna go away. It's that's one way of looking at it, or it could be making a whole lot more jobs. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's like your giant production that employs 8,000 people may scale down, but there will likely be 800 other smaller productions going on all over the place as well. So, that's
it's an optimistic way. I kind of hope to look that way. Okay. So at the end of our show, Tim, we kind of transitioned to stuff we've done with AI this week, and you do a lot. You spend a lot of time playing with AI tools. Is there something lately that you think is interesting that you've played with that you want to kind of shout out? We don't have to go into super detail, but I'm just kind of curious if there's a tool or something that could be interesting that people might be able to try at home.
For sure. I think that currently right now, I covered Rifffusion. The Rifffusion is an AI music generator. You can kind of think of it along the lines of like Udio or Suno. The fun part is that they were kind of the OGs in the AI music space. They sort of originated Stable Diffusion audio. So back when we first heard it and it was weird and warpy, and it sounded like it kind of came off of an AM transistor radio from like a possessed grandma's house in 1928. They were the ones that did that. So they kind of went underground, built up their model, clearly got some money somewhere along the lines, some backing along the lines. And now they've kind of resurfaced as Rifffusion. And I would say it's definitely in that sort of like Suno Udio camp. And the best part is it's currently free. They're in your free buffet open beta. So go sign up and just start generating, just generate and have fun with it.
Is there a type of music that it does really well versus others?
Let's see. So I ran modern country on it I don't like modern country. So I gave it the prompt, write a modern country song about how modern country is terrible. And it did a pretty great job with that. I've had it do metal. I've had it do sort of like your standard pop stuff and some hip hop, and all of it sounds, very serviceable. The thing that I like about it though, is that if you go into the Compose tab, which is kind of the advanced features, you can multi-prompt in there. So you can put all kinds of weird stuff in there, like Middle Eastern music, funk, surf rock, and then you have sort of temperature sliders for how much you want to have
that's
that
cool.
influence into the song. So you can kind of blend these genres together. I didn't even really get into it in the video, so this is a hot take for anyone that's made it this far into the podcast, is that you can time out when those things happen. So if you had like surf rock, you can put that influence at 0 from 0 seconds of the song to 30 seconds of the song, and then you just crank it all the way up along with, funk or Jamaican death metal or whatever you want to, whatever you kind of wanted to do. So there's ways that you can sort of blend in and out of genres, and that's something that I have not seen in any other music generator so far.
That's really cool. Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that. I now that you say that it came out of Stable Diffusion, guys, I remember it from forever ago. For some reason, I was thinking it's a new thing, but that's cool. Okay, we'll play a little piece of one of Tim's musics here just to get a sense of what it sounds like.
Every single night at 10, same old song comes on again. copy paste and autoplay, while real hearts just fade away.
All right, Tim, thank you so much for being here. We will see all of y'all next week. Kevin will be back, and we'll have a new fun show. No,
I'm challenging Kevin.
Kevin, he doesn't want to go. He doesn't want to go.
I'm challenging Kevin to a duel.
Bye, everybody. We'll see you next week.
See ya.